Welcome back to the Disconnected podcast. I'm your host, Jessica, and today I'm joined by Nate, who is a sophomore at Middle Tennessee State University, majoring in philosophy with a minor in religious studies. So welcome to the podcast, Nate.
Hey, how's it going?
Do you think that having friendships and relationships or being social in general is an important aspect of human life?
I would say yes, for certain. I think humans are social creatures by nature, just kind of how we've survived so long as a species. So I definitely think so.
How did you meet some of your closest friends?
So I have very few close friends. So I mean, I have one close friend that I made in like eighth grade, and he's been with me this like whole time. Yeah, and then I have my fiance, which I met while I was doing a musical. Yeah, that's how I met my closest friends, I guess.
Yeah. What was the musical?
The musical was A Good Man, Charlie Brown. I played Schroeder.
That's awesome. Have you ever maintained long distance friendships or relationships, like even with your parents or family members? And how did you stay connected with them?
Yeah, so me and my best friend, we haven't gone to the same high school since like sophomore year. Eventually, I moved away to college and stuff like that. I typically just call people that I care about like once every 2 weeks, usually, just to kind of check up and see what's going on. And that's kind of how I've maintained the majority of my relationships, my mom and my best friend. So, yeah.
Do you think that technology helps you maintain those relationships?
Yeah, for certain. I'm not flying any Ravens anytime soon with notes attached. Yeah, technology's been a big help.
So I know you said that you met your two closest friends in eighth grade and then at a play. Do you think that those relationships you could have started them and gotten to the depth you have now if you had started them over technology, like through social media or randomly finding them online or something like that?
I don't know, because I'm not a very like social person by nature. Like I'm not the kind of person to just go out and be like, hey, this is me, what's going on? Hey, like my best friend, how we started talking is he decided to sit with me at the lunch table in eighth grade. I didn't have any idea who this guy was. He just started talking to me. Like I didn't know him or really even care about him until like he kept talking to me over a period of time, and it just it went from I enjoy conversations to let's have these conversations more often to let's have them out of class to I guess he's my friend now. That's just kind of how that escalated. And as far as my fiance, I mean, yeah, probably not. It was pure coincidence. She happened to be the makeup artist for my musical, and yeah, so that just kind of started up like that. So yeah, probably not.
Do you think that relationships have less depth or tend to fade out if they're kept up only over technology?
No, I don't think so at all. And mostly because I think when people have a real connection to each other, that they are going to remain in contact with one another.
Yeah. Do you think it would be difficult to form a relationship with someone you have only met online and difficult to build a sense of trust with them if you only know them online, you've never actually met them?
Well, it depends. I form relationships with people who are teaching me something far better than I do with people who I just met online and we share, a common interest just kind of out of the ordinary. So I would say yes, for like professors and teachers, I form relationships with them extremely easy, even online, because of the fact that, they're teaching me something. And if I, enjoy who they are and I enjoy their company, I'm very quick and very open to, trust and communicate and enjoy their company. But as far as like, like a peer, probably not. I'm just not the kind of person to attach to someone on things that may or may not be that important to them. At least with a professor, I know that the subject is one of the most important things to them. I mean, it's what they do for a living. It's easy to make that connection and yeah, form a relationship.
So we'll kind of transition now into talking about religion. So can you tell me about your religious beliefs?
Sure. So I came into MTSU as an Episcopalian, which is a Christian denomination. But yeah, so I started out as an Episcopalian Christian who wanted to be a priest. To now I'm an atheist and I want to be a philosophy professor full time. And there were a lot of things that went into play there. Over the course of like 3 years, I got heavily into religion and then heavily out of it. It was a learning experience full of a lot of different reading material, different people. So my mom was I'm going to say vaguely Christian. I mean, God was always kind of a thing with my mom, the prayers and, look to God when you don't know what to do and different things like that. That was kind of my introduction to religion. It was kind of odd in a sense because my mom very early in my childhood introduced me to, religious stories like Noah and all of these things. And she had like box sets of like Bible stories that she would have me read and learn as like a small child. But then when I got older, it just kind of disappeared due to the fact that we moved to, a situation that just didn't allow for anything other than where's our food going to come from. Yeah, and that was kind of my introduction to religion, and it's always kind of been in the back, like it was always kind of in the background as far as my childhood went. So eventually I sit down and start learning about Christianity and, well, really in depth, like I start actually reading the New Testament. And I come to the conclusion that yes, like Jesus does align with my belief system, and I got this impression that it was like I was reading the culmination of ideas that I was having read aloud to me, like I was being told the ending of my thoughts. And it struck me as a very powerful otherworldly experience. I come to the conclusion that certain things that Jesus is saying, I believe are true, and that everything that Jesus says is correct. But everyone in Christianity isn't necessarily following that true way of what he was trying to say. It was like they didn't quite get it as far as in my point of view at that point. It was like they didn't quite get what Jesus was trying to say or what Jesus said in the Bible. So I decide I'm going to get involved in the church. So I decide that I'm going to go knock on the door of the Catholic Church. So that's the first thing that I do. At this point, I'm like 16. I have my own car. I have free time. So I decide, I'm going to go down to my local Catholic church and I'm just going to start talking to them. And it just doesn't quite pan out. I feel like I'm getting, like they're beating around the bush. And so after a while, I decide, well, it doesn't seem like the church is for me, mostly because anytime I have a question, I feel like I'm being shot down and silenced, and I caught that pretty much out the gate. They were like, well, come to our service and stuff like that. But I'm the kind of person, if I can't trust the person who is leading the mass or leading the organization, then everything else isn't going to add up. So fast forward a while, I get really heavily into choir in high school, and my choir director, asks me if I want to sing at his church for Christmas. So I get involved in my choir director's church, and I meet a very interesting United Methodist minister. He was very talkative. He was willing to negotiate, gave me reading materials, and everything wasn't so, this is the way it is, this is how it's going to be quiet. I felt like I had a little bit more freedom to talk. in this organization. I felt like I could contribute something. So I decided to become a United Methodist preacher, essentially. And then after that point, I kind of dropped the United Methodist Church and I moved on to the Episcopal Church. And then fast forward, COVID hit. I couldn't go to church anymore. And I was just kind of learning in college. At this point, I was convinced that Jesus's word was law, as far as it, as long as it was interpreted the right way. And I thought that the churches were corrupted in certain ways because of the lack of knowledge as far as the right way to interpret the word of Jesus. After a while, I started learning a lot of different things about religion. It was a combination of my philosophy class and my religious studies course. Philosophy is more so coming to a conclusion from the world around you, or coming to a conclusion given evidence. Meanwhile, theology is more so the same thing, except given the principle that you already take a certain truth to be true, which is that God exists. Not only does God exist, but your religion is the true religion. And then everything else kind of follows suit from that. And through my studies of all of this, I came to the conclusion that not only is religion a projection of our social habitats, but also that there is no true origin that you can come to other than people. People are always going to push their own agendas through religion.
Obviously, a lot of things that led to your beliefs and your decisions about what you believe and what you hold to be true. But are there certain things, or is there something or someone that you can pinpoint, or a few different factors that you can pinpoint that sort of led you to be an Episcopalian and then led you to be an atheist?
Well, I did my best to look at it as unbiasedly as possible. I didn't want my decisions to be influenced by the people around me, because ultimately, what Christianity bases itself on is the Bible, written words. So I tried to do my best to read my way through things and come to my own conclusions about them. Of course, I've had a lot of really smart people come my way who talk about things and make them make sense in certain ways. But yeah, I mean, I've been influenced by a lot of people, but I try not to let that persuade me as far as where the knowledge takes me.
So it's just knowledge and the facts that you're coming across and the text that you're reading and those sorts of things that are influencing your decision.
Yes. So the liturgical churches that I was a part of have a very specific doctrine that they follow. I try and use those things to come to my conclusions about the churches rather than basing them off of the personality or the judgments by people who are just simply a part of the church. In conclusion, I think that all of the people who have influenced me to do one thing or another have been really smart, but they are not authors and they're not experts. So I try to take their opinions with a grain of salt when I can.
I know you've talked about the different people in your life and how you've listened to them and you've talked to them about your beliefs and the different things that you've gone through. Has your choice to believe in religion and then not affected the way that you interact with these people?
Yes, it has affected my relationships with the people around me. I mean, my mom was very happy when I found religion and kind of what it did for me and made me feel like I was a part of something. And, it gave me a sense of purpose that was extremely strong. And my mom loved that for me. and the fact that I kind of fell out of it, she was kind of sad about it. But my mom has never been extremely influential in my life in the sense of, I've always come to conclusions on my own, and she's always expected me to do that. She loves me anyway, and that's, my mom's never loved me for my religious beliefs or loved me for lack of my religious beliefs. So, I mean, it has affected our relationship, and the fact that when we have a conversation about something terrible that's happened, my mom's immediate response is, like, I really wish you could, look to God for these things. And I'm like, it really wouldn't make a difference anyway. Like we just we have small clashes like that. But my mom's a reasonable person. So if I say something that makes sense to her, she acknowledges it, which is one of the things that I love about her the most. And if she says something that religious wise that, I feel like isn't really argumentative, like I'll be praying for you or something like that, I just kind of let it go. And, me and my best friend get into it all the time about everything. I mean, we've always been that way. So, I mean, it's just another thing to argue about with us.
You said your mom said, I wish you could go to God about these things, and you said it wouldn't matter anyway. Do you believe in any higher power or no?
I didn't really have an answer for that for a period of time. For a long period of time after I became an atheist and decided that Christianity wasn't the way to go, and neither was any other religion. I was kind of sat there in limbo. Like, I believe that there wasn't anything out there as far as like a spiritual being that cared anything about us. I subscribed more to the thought process of if there was a higher being out there, stripping away the fact that it would care anything about humans or anything that we're doing at all. If there was a beginning of the universe and something made everything else into existence, that thing, I guess you could call it God. And so I kind of got this. I always hesitated to say agnostic because I feel like agnostic has the stigma of people thinking that there's something spiritual, or people think of it as, well, there may be something out there may be nothing out there, but I don't know. I'm very adamant that I don't think there's anything spiritual, like as far as extraterrestrial thing. I just think that there may have been something at the beginning that caused all of this. And over time, I've come to a new conclusion based on my exposure to the philosopher Spinoza, where he goes into depth on how people may have came to the conclusion that, that there's a necessity for a God, that there needs to be a purpose for things. And I think it kind of goes like, well, people look for purpose in things because people have purpose for doing things. And people have a habit of asking those questions towards things that are not human. For instance, people may ask, why does it rain? If they don't get an answer or a purpose of why it would rain, they then ask themselves, why would I make it rain? And so they come to a conclusion that is based on human purposes or, an end to a goal. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's why you always see, godlike beings with human emotions or characteristics. One of my favorite sayings by my professor is that if cats had a god, it would also be a cat. But anyway, I think I feel like that's a really satisfying answer for me personally on why people would come to a conclusion that there is a God. And I've kind of come to the conclusion that, the universe doesn't necessarily need a beginning or end. There just is. Because ultimately, I can't put a human purpose with an end goal attached to something that is not human. If you want to call the universe God, then yeah, I say I believe in God, but it's just that. It's the universe. It acts the way that it does, and that's all there is. And I've kind of come to the conclusion that there is no purpose in life either. And for me personally, that's been extremely freeing.
So, in what you've been saying, do you think there's just not a need for people to believe in God with what we have around us and what we know about the world? Is there just not really a need for faith, for religion?
Well, in my opinion, I'm going to use a term that is used by Thomas Hobbes in his book called Leviathan. He uses the word sovereign. A sovereign, according to him, is an absolute power that people give to in order to live in a society. And I think there is a need for a sovereign. It's just something that we place our trust in order to coexist. For instance, the best definition that was used in my class was the dictionary. The dictionary is the sovereign for the English language. If I use a word and you're trying to interpret that meaning, you would consult the dictionary for that definition. I can't come up with a new definition for that word and expect you to understand what I'm saying. So I think there is a need for a sovereign in society. I don't necessarily think that needs to be God. I think it just needs to be, something that, people pay attention to and follow for the sake of society being society. As far as like morals go, do I think there would be absolute chaos without religion? I don't think so. And the main reason why is because society has to have certain rules to function. You don't steal from someone, not necessarily because it's good or bad or that you're going to go to hell or somewhere else or that, you're going to be smited by some being. You do it because if enough people steal things from one another, you now have corruption within your society. If people don't steal from one another and obey the laws that were given in the society runs smoother and you don't have fear of bad things happening. You have a society that's built around rules. I think as long as those things are in place, I don't think there's any reason for a God.
Do you think that if you could see God physically and hear his voice, see him speaking, see him walking around doing things, do you think that you would believe he exists, or is that something that matters at all?
Well, let me put it like this. If a spiritual being decided to manifest in front of me in ways that the universe doesn't currently operate under my current knowledge of the universe, and starts doing things like manipulating matter, this, that, and the other, and some kind of thing that you would call like a miracle, my immediate response was, the universe isn't exactly the way that we thought it was. That doesn't necessarily mean that this thing is the creator of the universe. I'm far more likely to believe that, but there's no definitive proof. I mean, maybe if the being showed me visions of it creating the universe, maybe I would be more inclined to believe that. But I mean, the only things that would do definitively in my mind is prove that the universe isn't exactly the way that we thought it was. There are more things in the universe that we haven't accounted for, that we haven't been exposed to, which is nothing new. I mean, it happens every day. It would just be an extreme version of that. I would find it extremely intriguing, though, to figure out how people, generation after generation, and come to this conclusion, this religious idea on how they figured it out specifically, that this thing exists. I'd find that story very interesting, and why it manifested in front of me. But yeah, I suppose that's my answer.
Okay. The last question is just, do you have anything you want to add to the conversation?
First, I would like to say that my goal in saying all of these things isn't necessarily to offend anyone or try and make it out to seem like I'm an expert, because I'm not. I'm just a person who read a bunch of books and met a bunch of people and experienced a bunch of things. And I know that's not universal, but it is my experience, and I hope that someone enjoys hearing about it. So I'd say that's my conclusion.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah.